LSU just fired Brian Kelly, the $95 million man who was supposed to save the Tigers. How does a coach go from hero to headline in under 3 seasons? Behind the roar of Death Valley lies a story of pressure, culture clash, and decisions that shocked college football. What really pushed LSU to pull the trigger now? Stay tuned. The truth isn't what you think. We'll explain everything in this video, step by step. Don't skip it, ladies and gentlemen. What a stunning twist in college football. LSU has dropped the hammer. Brian Kelly is out as head coach. The news shook Baton Rouge like a Saturday night in Death Valley. And fans across the country are asking the same question, what happened? This is a coach who was brought in to bring dominance back to LSU, a man with a 10-year contract and a mission to restore the Tigers' roar. But somewhere between the high hopes, the massive expectations, and the fierce SC grind, things went sideways. Kelly's tenure started with swagger, a few big wins, playoff ambitions, and that viral Southern accent moment everyone still remembers. But as the losses piled up and the locker room energy dimmed, the confidence that once electrified LSU began to fade. Sources say internal tensions, questionable play calling, and inconsistent performances against top rivals all played their part. The Tigers, a team built for power, just couldn't find their rhythm. And in the brutal world of SEC football, patience is a luxury no one can afford. Now LSU faces a crossroads. Who steps up next to lead this powerhouse? Can they rebuild the fire, the fight? The fear factor that once made Tiger Stadium the scariest place in college football. One thing's for sure, this isn't just a coaching change, it's a message. LSU wants dominance back, and the Brian Kelly era has officially come to a roaring end. LSU's decision to fire Brian Kelly has sent shockwaves through the college football world. It's the kind of headline that makes fans double, take and analysts scramble for answers. This isn't just another coaching change. This is LSU, one of the sport's crown jewels, cutting ties with a coach they once believed could restore their dynasty. When Kelly arrived in Baton Rouge, the expectations were sky high. He wasn't just hired to win games, he was brought in to rebuild a culture, to bring discipline and consistency back to a program that had fallen short of its own championship standards. From the start, Kelly's tenure was surrounded by spectacle. His move from Notre Dame stunned everyone, leaving one of the most storied programs in the country for the wild, pressure-packed world of the SEC was bold, even for a coach of his pedigree. LSU gave him a massive contract, 10 years, a reported $95 million, and the keys to one of the most talented rosters in America. It was supposed to be the perfect marriage, elite coach meets elite program. But beneath the flash, something never quite clicked. Kelly brought his system, his methods, his famously no-nonsense approach. He emphasized discipline, structure, and preparation. In his first season, there were flashes of what LSU fans had hoped for. A stunning upset over Alabama reignited the belief that the Tigers were back in business. The locker room buzzed with confidence, the fan base roared, and for a moment, it felt like the LSU of old. But in college football, momentum is fragile. By the next season, cracks began to show. Inconsistency plagued the team. The defense struggled to hold leads. The offense lost rhythm in key games. And LSU's once feared aura seemed to dull. Reports began circulating about tension between players and staff, frustration with leadership, and doubts creeping into the locker room. Every loss hit harder. Every mistake was magnified under the glare of national attention. For LSU's administration, the question became not whether Kelly could coach, his record speaks for itself, but whether he could truly connect with this program's unique identity. LSU football isn't about schemes or systems, it's about raw emotion, swagger and intensity. It's a culture built on passion and personality, and some insiders felt Kelly's approach, though professional and polished, didn't fully resonate with that spirit. The fit seemed off, and in the SEC, where every week feels like a playoff, a misalignment between coach and culture can be fatal. Then came the losses that sealed it. Games they were supposed to win turned into painful disappointments. The defense collapsed in crucial moments. The offense sputtered. And fans who once chanted Kelly's name began calling for change. LSU's not a patient program. It never has been. In Baton Rouge, the standard is championships, not excuses. Behind closed doors, the decision was swift. LSU's leadership saw the trajectory and didn't like where it was headed. They chose to act now rather than wait for another disappointing season to confirm what they already suspected. Brian Kelly's move from Notre Dame to LSU wasn't just another coaching transition. It was one of the most shocking and talked about moves in recent college football history. For over a decade, Kelly had built his name and legacy in South Bend, transforming Notre Dame into a consistent contender. He was the winningest coach in the school's history, a symbol of stability in a program defined by tradition and scrutiny. Leaving all of that behind for the chaos and volatility of the SEC raised eyebrows across the country. Why would a coach with that kind of comfort, reputation, and success risk it all for a program that chews through coaches as fast as it celebrates wins? The answer lay in ambition. Kelly wanted what had eluded him for years, a national championship at Notre Dame. Despite playoff appearances and double-digit win seasons, he hit a ceiling. Recruiting restrictions, academic standards, and institutional limits made it nearly impossible to compete with the raw athleticism and depth found in this SEC. LSU, on the other hand, was a different world. It was a powerhouse factory of NFL talent, fueled by relentless recruiting and a fan base obsessed with dominance. To Kelly, it was the ultimate opportunity, the kind of job that could cement his legacy among the sport's all-time greats. When he arrived in Baton Rouge, he brought the aura of a CEO, meticulous, detail-driven, and unflinchingly focused. He spoke of structure, accountability, and rebuilding from the inside out. LSU fans, used to larger-than-life personalities like Ed Orgeron, initially didn't know what to make of him. Orgeron had been raw emotion. Kelly was calculated control. The contrast was sharp, but for a time, the results spoke for themselves. His debut season included major wins, including the unforgettable upset of Alabama that reignited Tiger Stadium's electricity. Kelly's methods seemed to be working. Discipline and consistency were returning to a team that had been chaotic in the years after their 2019 title run. However, the underlying friction between Kelly's personality and LSU's cultural identity never disappeared. His style was clinical, his humor dry, his tone often misinterpreted. In a state where football is religion and coaches are expected to embody local passion, Kelly sometimes came across as distant. The viral Southern accent moment at his first press event symbolized this disconnect, a coach trying to fit into a culture that didn't quite fit him. Even as the wins came, skepticism lingered. Was he really one of them, or just passing through on a massive paycheck and a grand experiment? Recruiting battles also highlighted the challenge. Competing with juggernauts like Alabama and Georgia for top-tier talent meant more than facilities or tradition. It required charisma, energy, and cultural fluency. Kelly's pitch was polished but lacked the emotional spark that resonates with young athletes raised in SC country. As rivals loaded up on blue-chip players, LSU's momentum began to stall. The early optimism turned into pressure. Every game became a test of not just tactics but of belonging. Each loss amplified the question, had LSU's gamble on Kelly's proven record ignored the importance of chemistry and connection in a region where football isn't just a sport but an identity? In his early seasons at LSU, Brian Kelly tried to build his own version of order in a place defined by chaos and energy. He came in talking about process, accountability, and structure, ideas that sounded impressive on paper but didn't always translate in the heat SEC competition. He wasn't the kind of coach who relied on slogans or emotion. He relied on execution. His message was about doing things the right way, every play, every game, every week. That approach worked at Notre Dame, where discipline and consistency were the backbone of success. But LSU is a different kind of ecosystem. It's fueled by swagger, personality, and raw emotion, something no whiteboard or system can easily replicate. When Kelly's first season produced flashes of brilliance, it looked like he might have cracked the code. The Tigers upset Alabama in a thrilling finish, and suddenly the entire college football world turned its eyes to Baton Rouge. It felt like LSU had found its balance. Kelly's structure combined with the explosive talent Louisiana always produces. The locker room believed, the fans believed, and for a moment LSU football felt alive again. But in college football, momentum is fragile and expectations unforgiving. As the next season began, cracks formed in the foundation. The defense, once a hallmark of LSU's identity, became a weakness. Missed tackles, blown assignments, and mental lapses piled up week after week. The offense, built around explosive playmakers, couldn't maintain rhythm when it mattered most. The same players who celebrated big wins began to question leadership behind closed doors. Frustration leaked into the public. Anonymous reports hinted at disconnects between coaches and players. And even assistant staff turnover suggested growing internal strain. Kelly's mantra of discipline began to sound hollow when the product on the field failed to reflect it. Fans, who had once embraced his professionalism as a refreshing change from the emotional chaos of the Orgeron era, grew restless. The passion they expected from the sidelines felt missing. Kelly's stoic demeanor on game day, his clipped post-game answers, and his calculated tone created distance. In Louisiana, where football is more cultural than corporate, that distance matters. The more he focused on systems, the more he lost the pulse of the people who define LSU's identity. Then came the crucial games that shaped perception. Against top rivals, LSU looked unprepared, unfocused, and flat. In the SEC, that's not just losing, that's a betrayal of expectation. Each defeat reopened doubts about whether Kelly truly understood the fabric of the program he was leading. His strategies felt mechanical against teams playing with instinct and emotion. Even his recruiting, once touted as elite, began to show signs of strain as local prospects drifted toward rival schools with coaches who felt more connected to the regional energy. Inside the athletic department, the pressure built. LSU is not built for patience, and every loss echoed louder than the one before it. Boosters, fans, and insiders started to question if the problem wasn't just execution but alignment. Kelly's philosophy of control clashed with LSU's natural rhythm of chaos-driven excellence. The Tigers didn't look like themselves, and in the SEC, identity is everything. As the tension grew around LSU's struggles, it became clear that the issue was no longer about talent or tactics, but about connection and identity. Brian Kelly's methods, though rooted in discipline and precision, clashed with the heartbeat of LSU's football culture. Baton Rouge doesn't thrive on quiet consistency. It thrives on noise, emotion, and defiance. The LSU teams that captured national attention under Sub-On Miles and Orgeron played with a kind of reckless confidence, a fire that came from passion rather than calculation. Kelly's version of leadership, however, was built on control, on minimizing chaos rather than channeling it. Over time, that control began to feel like constraint. In the locker room, players respected Kelly's awe sume, but struggled to connect with his style. He demanded structure in an environment where energy had always been a weapon. His approach was methodical, focused on doing small things right, but LSU's identity had always been a big moment. It's explosive plays and emotional surges that could turn games around in seconds. The Tigers' most memorable wins came from unpredictability, from the sheer force of will that defined their greatest players. Kelly's program, by contrast, often looked mechanical, calculated, and cautious. That difference in energy seeped into every layer of the team's performance. Recruiting began to expose the divide further. While Kelly's staff chased national talent, they lost ground in their own backyard. Louisiana is one of the richest recruiting territories in the country, but it's also deeply cultural. Relationships matter, energy matters, and authenticity matters. Kelly's demeanor didn't always translate in those living rooms. Parents and players didn't just want a coach who could win. They wanted someone who understood the pride of playing for LSU. Someone who spoke the same language of intensity that runs through the state's football tradition. Competing against Alabama and Georgia wasn't just about facilities or schemes. It was about embodying the Southern football spirit that fuels commitment and loyalty. On the field, that disconnect showed in the lack of unity. LSU teams under Kelly looked talented but disjointed, full of individual brilliance, but lacking the shed that once defined the program. Players played hard, but not always together. The energy that once made Tiger Stadium roar with intimidation began to fade. Fans noticed the change. They saw less swagger, less identity, less of the chaos that used to terrify opponents. Even in wins, the spark felt dimmer. The SEC isn't forgiving to coaches who lose emotional command. Every team is talented, every roster loaded with stars. But what separates champions is the culture, the bond between players, fans, and leadership. As LSU's rhythm slipped, the administration saw a program adrift, strong on paper but hollow in spirit. Kelly's system promised control, but in a place built on passion, control without connection became weakness. The Tigers had discipline but no pulse, talent but no soul. And for a fan base that equates football with identity, that was the ultimate fracture. The breaking point for Brian Kelly at LSU came not from one catastrophic loss, but from the steady accumulation of moments that eroded belief. Each disappointing performance added weight to an already strained relationship between the coach, the team, and the fan base. LSU is a program where expectation doesn't merely exist, it consumes every game, every play. Every decision is measured against the legacy of champions, and when results falter, patience runs thin. Kelly's second season was defined by inconsistency, flashes of brilliance buried beneath avoidable collapses. The defense struggled to maintain discipline, the offense failed to deliver in clutch moments, and special teams errors turned winnable games into frustrating defeats. What made these losses sting more was the absence of emotional response. When LSU teams lose, fans expect anger, fire, and a visible determination to fix it. Kelly's calm, corporate demeanor instead came across as detachment. Post-game conferences filled with talk about execution and process sounded sterile next to the raw frustration that fans and players felt. The disconnection between his tone and the environment he was in grew sharper with every loss. Inside the athletic department, conversations began to shift from tactical concerns to cultural misalignment. It wasn't just about football anymore, it was about fit. For booster decision makers, the warning signs were familiar. LSU has lived through transitions before, but never one that felt this dissonant. Previous coaches had flaws, but they embodied the program's wild energy. Orgeron, for all his chaos, could make a locker room believe it could beat anyone. Kelly's approach lacked that emotional ignition. Players followed orders but didn't seem inspired. The offense played within itself, the defense lacked aggression, and the overall team demeanor suggested obligation rather than hunger. The program's identity had shifted from ferocity to formality, and that shift alienated the very base that defined it. Recruiting feedback deepened the concern. High-profile recruits, once drawn to LSU's infectious energy, began choosing other programs where they felt stronger emotional resonance. Kelly's staff worked hard, but effort couldn't replace connection. Recruits wanted to feel passion, to see themselves as part of something bigger than football, a feeling LSU used to sell better than anyone. When that disappeared, so did the edge in recruiting battles. The numbers looked respectable, but the intangible momentum that fuels elite programs began slipping away. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Boosters voiced frustration about direction. Fans filled radio shows and forums with calls for change. And within the athletic department, confidence in Kelly's long-term vision deteriorated. LSU's leadership faced the same question that many powerhouse programs eventually confront. Stay the course and hope for delayed results, or act decisively before the decline becomes permanent. In the SEC, delay is often fatal. The conference's competitive intensity punishes hesitation, and LSU's history shows a pattern of decisive, sometimes ruthless, moves when expectations aren't met. The decision to fire Brian Kelly was less about a single failure and more about a growing recognition that the experiment had reached its ceiling, that the energy that once surrounded his arrival had quietly dissipated into resignation. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.